The clock whispered quietly in the hallways of Elizabeth's home, marking the creep of midnight. Shadows stretched ethereal and patient across the walls, as if made from the very fabric of waiting and tension. Among these midnight hues, Elizabeth herself seemed to carry a quiet weight, an enduring grace reminiscent of those few who possess profound strength but favor silence over speech. She was a silent queen in a throne room of shadows, her reign defined by understanding rather than words. Yet this night brought a change, an unexpected visitor in the form of a swift, desperate knock at her door. In muddled dreams disturbed by the night's stillness, Elizabeth stirred. The knock, strident and insistent, did not belong to the usual realm of her ordered nights. She recognized that there are moments when one must transform into something more than they appear. Tonight was such a time. Rising with purpose, she moved through the silent corridors, the echo of her footsteps the only company in the bewitching cold light. When she opened the door, Elizabeth was not greeted by the expected tranquility of the night, but by the sight of her daughter Sarah, a vision of fragile strength wrapped in the velvet of the night's distress. The moonlight danced reluctantly around her bruised face, a tapestry of pain and unspoken words that needed no introduction. Yet in her eyes a battle raged, a fierce, undefined storm, where anguish and a glimmer of hope intertwined. Elizabeth absorbed the image, her heart breaking in a silence louder than thunder. It was not the first time she saw betrayal wear a familiar face, but this was different. This was Sarah, her own flesh and blood, fraught with scars that told stories of battles fought behind closed doors. Her heart threatened to rupture with unspoken questions. What shadows had crossed the threshold into her daughter's life while she sat unaware, cocooned in her illusions of safety? As a mother, Elizabeth had nurtured a spirit of independence in Sarah, instilling an ethos of strength and resilience. Yet there are battles no one should fight alone. Ever the strategist in the quiet war of life, Elizabeth embraced her daughter, her touch both scabbard and shield. In her silence, a vow echoed: no more secrets, no more shadows untreated by the sun's light. The pressing urgency of Sarah's presence spoke volumes. The silence was palpable, a medium through which both women communicated as they locked eyes. Elizabeth gleaned fragments of an unspeakable narrative, a betrayal of sacred vows, an intrusion of violence where love should reside. The fragments pointed in a single direction: a man who had turned protector into violator and lover into tormentor. Robert, once a cherished member of the family tapestry, now loomed like an ominous specter. Elizabeth saw with crystalline clarity the path laid before them, even if unspoken destiny had demanded action, a stark realization that silence would no longer serve as a refuge. The nights of quiet acceptance and hidden bruises were over. A game of strategy was afoot, one where justice was both the battleground and the reward. Amidst the chaos of thoughts, Elizabeth remained composed, her silence shifting from passive absence to an active, formidable force. This was not surrender, but strategy. A chessboard of emotions where each move would be carefully plotted, vengeance entwined with justice, protection with empowerment. Elizabeth, the silent queen, would transform, wielding silence as both sword and shield. In the embrace of the cold night, they stepped back inside the door, softly closing on a world that had once felt safe. Shadows retreated at their passage, no longer dominant, as Elizabeth's determination illuminated the path ahead. Silence, she realized, had its place, but it would no longer dictate the terms of engagement. The quiet fortress she had built around herself over the years was now a bastion for her daughter. Under this roof, Sarah would find sanctuary and strength, a refuge from the tempest within and without. But just as Elizabeth wielded silence, she also understood the inevitable. The night would see allies awakened, strategies devised, and a mother's love transformed into a weapon of righteousness and resolve. As Elizabeth held the door against the whispers of the night, an unasked question lingered, draped in the silence she cherished so dearly. What other weapons lay dormant in the silence, waiting for those with ears attuned to hear and hearts willing to listen? This was no retreat, but the beginning of a saga, where the silence would no longer serve as the antagonist, but the very fabric of liberation. In the silent hours before dawn, a blanket of unease shrouded the house. Elizabeth sat beside Sarah, her daughter's tear-streaked face illuminated by the pale glow of a solitary lamp. The weight of unspeakable truths hung heavy in the air, a silent guardian to the pain nestled between them. In this muted sanctuary, protective instincts and fierce determination began to crystallize into something both formidable and necessary. Sarah's voice, fragile yet determined, broke the silence, a confession wrapped in agony and betrayal. Her husband Robert was not merely the source of her physical scars but the architect of emotional fissures that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. His affair with another woman had sparked a vicious cycle of abuse that now lay bare before Elizabeth's incredulous gaze. Betrayal gleamed like shards of broken glass, reflecting the deep chasm of trust shattered by his actions. The very man who had once promised to cherish her daughter had become an embodiment of cruelty, his duplicity carving scars into the soul of their family. It was a moment that demanded reckoning, a line in the sands of their shared history, drawing an unspoken vow. Elizabeth felt a fierce resolve harden within her. This wrong would not remain unanswered. Her determination took root in her core, sprouting branches of righteous defiance, each thought a calculated step toward justice. No longer would she be a passive observer of her own life, waiting for change to happen. Instead, she would forge a new path, one predicated on the insistence of truth and justice over silent suffering. Therein lay the duality of intent, protect and prepare. As a mother, Elizabeth knew the urgency of providing immediate care, tending to Sarah's visible wounds with tender hands that belied the tumult within. Yet each gesture, each touch that comforted also served as a reminder of the battle they must wage. Preparation was paramount, the need to gather strength and ally, the unspoken mantra guiding Elizabeth through the haze of fatigue and fury. Elizabeth's mind became a blueprint for action, her resolve like the bracing touch of winter winds that sharpened focus and galvanized intention. She saw the path marked ahead, a way to dismantle the facade Robert had erected, to expose the lies interwoven into the fabric of his life. With her heart a vessel of determination, she began to lay the groundwork for a journey toward vindication. Her efforts would be meticulous, each piece of evidence carefully collected, each witness approached with purposeful intent. The battle before them demanded resilience and expertise in equal measure, a careful navigation of legal corridors intertwined with the complexities of human emotion. These were the hours of quiet determination, of whispered plans and fragile hopes, unfurling like tentative flowers in dismal light. Elizabeth envisioned a covenant of trust, a circle of allies and supporters who would stand alongside them in this crucible of truth. She noticed with profound gratitude those whose quiet actions spoke volumes, the gentle hands of medical professionals, the steely resolve of supportive friends and neighbors. In these connections, she saw the scaffolding of their defense being constructed, a fortress against the oncoming storm they would face together. The truth, stark and unyielding, had been set free not merely as an act of courage but as the harbinger of their transformative journey. As Elizabeth cradled her daughter's wounded spirit, she found within herself the courage to confront not just the perpetrator, but the very foundations of fear and resignation that had once held them captive. In the embers of her resolve, the flicker of a plan began to take shape. Each moment spent in preparation was not just a prelude to confrontation but a reclamation of agency. The silence that Robert had once wielded like a weapon would be matched and countered, a silence now allied with purpose, a catalyst for change. Elizabeth knew that the fight ahead would demand their very essence, yet for Sarah, for herself, she would face the echoes of their hardships and rise resilient and unmoved. This was but the genesis of a saga, a journey where a mother's love, once tender and sheltering, took on the armor of advocacy and action. As the night waned and the dawn's first light brushed against the horizon, so too did the promise of new beginnings, a world yet to be reshaped by their enduring strength. In the heart of this transformation lay not just revenge but redemption, a powerful quest fueled by the certainty of their cause and the imperative for justice. And together they would emerge from this crucible, unbroken and emboldened, ready to rewrite the narrative of their lives and to inspire others who shared their path. As the morning sun reluctantly pulled away the veil of night, the urgency of Elizabeth's actions fueled her weary form. Sarah's injuries spoke volumes of unuttered horror, the silent testament to a history of neglect and abuse. Yet intertwined with Elizabeth's exhaustion was an unyielding determination to act swiftly and decisively. A mother does not falter at the sight of her child in pain; she becomes an unassailable force. In the calm chaos that only someone steeped in resolve can orchestrate, Elizabeth picked up the phone, her voice steady for the first time since the storm had descended upon them. Calling the hospital, she arranged for an immediate examination and documented evidence of the injuries that marked Sarah's skin, a tapestry of her suffering and a vital piece in the burgeoning puzzle that would bring Robert to justice. Elizabeth's strategy was as unfaltering as it was instinctual. She understood the necessity of moving beyond mere words, of cementing their claims in irrefutable facts. This wasn't just a battle over their narrative, it had become a war fought in the corridors where law and morality intersect. The medical records would become their shield, her daughter's ordeal, written in the language of bruises and cuts, etched with the precision necessary for their case to withstand scrutiny. Simultaneously, Elizabeth began the complex dance of signaling to allies who could lend weight to her cause. Each call to friends, each recounting of the painful truths, added layers to her expanding arsenal. There was no time for hesitation or doubt. Like the meticulous workings of a grand clock, each piece had to fit perfectly, each movement synchronized with the next as they pieced together the fragments of a shattered life. Her voice, now confident and unwavering, echoed across the phone lines and through whispered conversations that rippled through their community. Elizabeth knew too well the power of public perception, the way it could shape destinies and sway outcomes. She would wield it with care, allowing her side of the story to take root even amidst the cacophony of speculation and judgment. Yet beneath this orchestrated ferocity was the fundamental human need for connection in moments of despair. Elizabeth knew that turning isolation into opportunity required transforming strangers into allies. Her efforts cast a net over trusted acquaintances, capturing within it support and solidarity. But she was fully aware she was not assembling just an army of witnesses and testimonies. She was building a sanctuary of trust for Sarah to fall back on, a buffer from a world that had turned unkind and hostile. Through the act of seeking help, Elizabeth realized the power inherent in vulnerability, the strength found not in solitary resilience but in collective action, an idea as old as humanity itself. In their struggle, allies emerged not as mere supporters but as essential pillars bearing the weight of truth, with Elizabeth as its bearer. Together, they would harness their combined resources to pursue justice with unrelenting purpose. And silently, as the blueprint of their plan unfolded, Elizabeth's spirit was rekindled by Sarah's growing resilience. The daughter who had once come to her seeking refuge now began to transform, drawing strength from her mother's example and the indisputable reality that their actions would not only bring Robert to account, but would empower countless others caught in the shadows of their own battles. It was in this intricate balance between empowerment and protection, justice and care, that the real battle for Sarah's future was played out. Each step forward was more than a legal strategy. It was a testament to the enduring bond between mother and daughter and their shared journey toward freedom and healing. Elizabeth felt the immediate urgency of their current struggles begin to mingle with the profound understanding that the road to justice would require not just precise action, but a sustained commitment to their cause, a journey that had only just begun. The threads of the unfolding saga were beginning to weave into a complex tapestry of alliance and confrontation. Elizabeth, emboldened by the steadfast support emanating from those around her, now turned her focus toward gathering every shred of evidence that might lend weight to the case against Robert. Not merely a quest for justice, it was a concerted effort to fortify the fragile safe haven she was determined to build for Sarah. It was a gloomy afternoon when Elizabeth made the journey next door to visit her neighbor, Miss Camilla. The formidable yet kindly widow had lived on Elizabeth Street for decades, her eyes well acquainted with the ebb and flow of domestic dramas that often escaped public knowledge. It was here within the walls of Camilla's modest ivy-covered home that Elizabeth found a surprise ally willing to bolster her cause with a formidable piece of evidence footage from Camilla's security cameras. The video proof capturing Robert's comings and goings at odd hours could lend undeniable credence to Sarah's claims. Through misty eyes, Elizabeth realized that Miss Camilla's support was not simply an act of neighborly kindness, but a profound acknowledgement of justice as a collective ethos, a strong rebuttal to the solipsistic assumptions of betrayal. The footage altered the landscape of their struggle, illuminating paths that had previously seemed dim in the murky chaos of emotional turmoil. The conversation between the women transformed from one of practical strategizing into a deeper acknowledgement of how lives entwine in the fabric of community, how in times of duress bonds are more than personal agreements, they are lifelines. Camilla's decision to stand with them elevated the stakes, turning a relentless pursuit of justice into a vivid testament of community solidarity. It would be suggested to you watching this saga unfurl to comprehend the power of alignment without hesitation, a recognition that standing with a just cause is the fiber holding humanity together, especially when they appear threadbare. Elizabeth returned home with the files in hand, her grasp on the narrative tightening as her resolve reinforced those around her. The exterior may have shown subtle signs of fatigue, drawn cheeks, eyes slightly dulled by sleepless nights, but inside a fire reignited untamed and resolute in purpose. The shift from desperation to unexpected empowerment had injected Elizabeth with an energy that propelled everyone involved forward, something that left no space for doubt. With the evidence secured, Elizabeth and Sarah began delineating the architecture of their legal battle, each piece identified and catalogued like components of a machinery designed to level the field of justice. The enormity of this undertaking did not slip past unnoticed by anyone involved. Witnesses were approached tactfully, each recalling details that might have vanished into obscurity had Elizabeth not guided the inquiry with precision, akin to a detective leading an investigation of the utmost conviction. Social accounts were cross-referenced hastily for digital traces, every character examined with an eye for inconsistencies, a virtual mosaic collected together under Elizabeth's vigilant eye. In Sarah, a similar transformation began to unfold. Once recoiling from touch and disoriented by grief, she now maneuvered through the tactical demands of their campaign with a growing confidence rooted in her mother's unwavering certainty and recently discovered camaraderie. What Elizabeth inadvertently cultivated was more than defense, but an assertion of identity, a remembrance of the self worthy of unwavering protection. The specter of Robert, daunting as it had once seemed, began to shrink in the presence of these newfound allies supporting Sarah and Elizabeth alike. His edifice, constructed on manipulation and deceit, faced dismantlement by simple truths, spoken aloud, a prospect both comforting and daunting to consider. The momentum they generated from building a support network was more than a means of protection, but rather a declaration of intent. Allies emerged as stalwart confidants, their voices like beacons guiding Elizabeth and Sarah through choppy waters. As days turned into weeks, the rhythm of preparation began to steadily pulse, a cadence of determination that synchronized those involved, like a symphony of voices speaking to the importance of a shared goal. Reflect now on this narrative with its ebb and flow, and consider the inherent drama in rallying others to a cause. It is not an act of altruism solely reserved for times of crisis, but a fundamental recognition of shared humanity, a plea for empathy. Witness the strength found in the collective as ordinary individuals relinquish neutrality, standing fierce in allegiance to truth and justice. Each story told, every ally joined, reflected a larger narrative, a movement towards empowered change that ripples far beyond the confines of a single domestic dispute. Let this tale inspire, for one can find hope and revolution in the most unexpected alliances, in the silent assurance of those who choose not merely to stand beside, but unmistakably to stand with you. The process of uncovering the reality of betrayal is often an excruciating one, a steep descent into the shadows where truths that were wished to remain hidden are suddenly illuminated. For Elizabeth, the quiet moments spent poring over the evidence of Robert's threats and indiscretions represented a turning point, a definite shift from solace in ignorance to empowerment through truth. As she unearthed the digital documentation of his reprehensible deeds, each ominous message, each taunting photograph depicting his affair, a profound comprehension of Sarah's pain established itself within Elizabeth. Her daughter's bruises, visible displayed on screens as awful vestiges of Robert's malice, became more than just physical marks of a terrible reality. They were grim reminders of the countless instances of fear, humiliation, and powerlessness Sarah endured under Robert's dominion. The depth of such trauma rippled within Elizabeth, awakening an intensified maternal resolve to shield Sarah and shatter the cycle of manipulation and emotional abuse that Robert wielded over them both. To those observing from a distance, Elizabeth's actions might have seemed like mere reactions to a series of unfortunate events, a mother championing her child, as any would in her circumstances. But to Elizabeth, this confrontation was personal, resonant with a past shadowed by echoes of a similar plight. Her memory stirred not just for Sarah but for the younger version of herself who also dreamt of a harmonious family life only to have it crumble at the hands of deceit. In this discovery, paved by heartbreak, an indomitable determination took root, one that would inspire their campaign for justice and freedom from subjugation. Each evening, the air crisp with anticipation, Elizabeth meticulously catalogued and organized every critical piece of evidence: the screenshots of his abusive tirades, the photographs revealing moments stolen with his mistress, and the threatening emails that exposed the ease with which he manipulated reality. In this task, Elizabeth wasn't merely gathering ammunition for the impending legal battle. She was architecting a narrative steeped in facts that could unravel Robert's fabric of lies. Meanwhile, Sarah, though fragile with the weight of her grief and feeling shackled by shame, experienced a resurgence of strength from these revelations. As they sat at their dining table sorting through the ugliness of Robert's betrayal, there emerged a burgeoning connection between mother and daughter, each finding unspoken solace in the presence of the other. This shared journey of uncovering the truth forged deeper bonds between them, as though they were together mourning and systematically eradicating the tomb of secrets that had ensnared Sarah. The revelation brought forth the dualities of human experience, the dread mingled with a liberative candor, the painful acknowledgement of betrayal against the liberating resolve to fight back. For Elizabeth, it was a time of transformative rebirth. No longer was she the passive observer constrained by societal expectations confined within domestic peripheries. Instead, she became the harbinger of change, her actions resounding with the echoes of female resistance and resilience. Even as the momentum gathered strength, Elizabeth was cognizant of the psychological toll it exacted on Sarah. Exposure to the harshness of their reality stirred a hornet's nest of emotions: anger and sorrow, helplessness entwined with intense determination. In their moments of reflection, Elizabeth would often remind Sarah of the purifying power found in uncovering the truth, no matter how devastating. Such moments underscored the essence of their mission, reclaiming their narrative and dismantling the fortress of intimidation Robert had methodically constructed. In essence, every piece of evidence collected did more than form the skeleton of their legal arsenal. It was a cathartic ritual, each printed screenshot and signed affidavit, a shackle removed from Sarah's existence, each corroborated testimony a step away from the darkness. Holistically, the process represented a rebirth into a life woven with authenticity and courage, a future untarnished by Robert's oppressive grip. As the case built momentum and their story resonated with profound empathy among their allies, Elizabeth, once silent, now roared with conviction, her every action a tribute to the fortitude inherent in those who dare to confront their adversaries. These preparatory acts, imbued with forethought and a touch of indignation, laid the groundwork for the inevitable confrontation, promising a dynamic contrast to the deception that Robert thought impermeable. In this intricate tapestry of justice, they stood united, Elizabeth and Sarah, two architects of their destiny, poised to make their definitive stand. The courtroom stood silent, each corner echoing the tension that had built up over months of meticulous preparation. As Elizabeth stepped forward, her presence alone sent a shiver through the audience, a testament to the unwavering determination that had been her constant companion on this tumultuous journey. In her hand, she held a stack of undeniable evidence, a body of work that symbolized the broader narrative of a mother protecting her child, a woman reclaiming her power. As the legal proceedings commenced, the air was heavy with anticipation. The once vibrant charisma Robert wielded was reduced to mere defensiveness under the weight of the accusations. No longer was he the infallible figure he portrayed, his fortress crumbling under the pressure of unveiled truths and steel-bent justice. Each piece of evidence, introduced from medical records to sealed affidavits and videos, stripped away layers of deceit carefully woven to conceal his true nature. The courtroom came alive with the vibrancy of truth, as Sarah, with trembling hands yet resolute voice, offered her testimony. Her journey from victimhood to empowerment echoed through the walls, her words intertwining pain with purpose. Faces in the crowd varied, some harboring disbelief, others empathy. Here lay a defining moment, a woman's strength facing its fiercest trial. Elizabeth's lawyer, a beacon of precision and legality, orchestrated a symphony of arguments aimed directly at unraveling the facade Robert had constructed. Each word spoken carried the weight of countless sleepless nights, strategic meetings, and unwavering resolve to bring forth justice not only for Sarah, but for countless others who shared her plight. The room held its breath as expert witnesses corroborated their findings, each revelation driving another nail into Robert's manufactured reality. Amid this unfolding drama, Elizabeth's gaze never wavered. She embodied the mother archetype, fierce, protective, unyielding. Her mind flickered back to moments of doubt and despair, the whispers of a town divided by loyalty and apprehension, and she felt the surge of vindication swell within her. Acknowledging Sarah's bravery and stepping forward, Elizabeth knew they were crafting a narrative not just for their own healing, but for the empowerment of others buried under the weight of similar shadows. As Robert's defenses faltered under the onslaught of empirical data and raw human testimony, Elizabeth quietly acknowledged the vital role of allies who had stood by them. Miss Camilla, whose discreet recording unraveled knots of deceit, and even Denise, whose unexpected testimony spoke of manipulation and coercion. Each ally was a thread pulling them closer to an inevitable reckoning. The trial, a long unfolding tableau of human resilience, and the persistent quest for justice carved its essence into every participant. It clarified motives, reassessed alliances, and reset boundaries. The crisp delivery of a sentence years in the making resounded around the courtroom. The judge, marker of societal equilibrium, delivered a verdict in favor of Elizabeth and Sarah. As the echoes subsided, a momentary stillness swept through the room, one heavy with the reality of justice served and the poignant recognition of wounds yet to heal. Justice, while affirming, also bore with it a reminder of the scars left behind, deep wounds on souls marred by betrayal and fight. Elizabeth and Sarah, clutching the shards of their victory, recognized that true healing was a journey in itself. The story of Elizabeth and Sarah's legal battle did not end with the proclamation of a verdict. It became a narrative of transformation, urging others to shed their cloaks of invisibility and demand recognition in the doubting eyes of society. As Elizabeth looked around, she saw not only victorious closure, but also fertile beginnings of hope, recovery, and the power retained by those who refused to cower. Outside the courthouse, the gathered crowd reflected a society recalibrating its compass, once divided by deceit, now uniting under the truth revealed. Some whispered in corners, others openly embraced the outcomes. The air was thick with a new chapter setting its roots into the fabric of their once fractured community. Elizabeth walked alongside Sarah, each step a testament to survival, the unspoken vow of renewal echoing between them. This triumph was but a doorway to continued advocacy, the fight for recognition and acknowledgement, the quest to mend and inspire. In the unfolding silence, Elizabeth lay silent plans for the future, a future she would architect as both mother and warrior torchbearer for others seeking light amid relentless darkness. Through her journey, she gathered not just the strands of personal restitution, but paved paths for communal resilience, a story that would echo long after the courtroom drama had ceased. Elizabeth had carefully stitched together the fragments of evidence that lay scattered like shards of a shattered vase across her life. With each photograph, every second of recorded video, the testimonies forged in truth from her closest allies, she constructed a narrative that painted not only a grim portrait of betrayal, but a beacon of undeniable proof. The synergy formed between her preparation and the alliances she had fostered stood as a testament to her resolve, a transformation from a mother who once spiraled in emotional turmoil to a figure of calculated resolve, marshaling her forces against the tides of manipulation and abuse that her daughter had endured. In the quiet moments of planning, Elizabeth understood that the emotional chaos that reigned in her heart had to be compartmentalized, shelved temporarily as she donned the armor of logic and legal strategy. It was in this clinical dissection of events and methodical stitching of evidence that her humanity shone, bathing her in the glow of 1,000 unbending resolves. Evidence was her weapon. A well-documented photograph of Sarah's bruises, the time-stamped recordings capturing Robert's transgressions, and sworn statements from friends and neighbors corroborating the degradation of her daughter's spirit. Elizabeth's network of support became more than just a circle of empathy. It transformed into a fortified battalion ready to flank, shield, and advance under her command. Allies like Miss Camilla, whose security camera had inadvertently recorded the damning proof needed to unshackle Sarah, were the strands weaving into this tapestry of retribution. Each ally offering their assistance, some with legal acumen, others with unwavering moral support, fitted seamlessly into the grand architecture of exposure Elizabeth pursued. The decision to confront Robert directly was calculated, a move she planned with the foresight of a chess grandmaster anticipating her antagonist's counter. Every night in the still solitude of her room she rehearsed her words, sculpting them as weapons sharp enough to pierce through the facade Robert wrapped himself in. Her weapon, irrefutable evidence, was backed by the unwavering silence of conviction, poised as she stepped into this confrontation with the composure of someone who demanded not revenge, but justice. For those around her, Elizabeth wasn't just a woman scorned or a mother protecting her cub. She evolved into the embodiment of communal vigilance, a reminder of the power inherent in demanding accountability from those who choose to play with people's lives as if they were inconsequential. This wasn't simply about righting a wrong, it was about battling the systemic rot that allows abuses to fester in the shadows. Yet, amid her strategic armor, Elizabeth remained acutely aware of her humanity, her vulnerability manifesting in stolen solitary moments where exhaustion threatened to apex her unyielding determination. The weight of her daughter's suffering hung heavily on her shoulders, but each burden seemingly added to her fuel, refining the steel of her pursuit into purer forms with which she could strike her adversaries where they were most insecure in their comfort of unchecked debasement. It was within this chaos of plotting and strategizing that Elizabeth found space to reflect on the essence of her fight, not out of vengeance, but of reclamation. The pursuit of justice for Elizabeth had become less about the victory over Robert and more about the cathartic shedding of fear, an exhibition of strength for Sarah, who watched, learned, and absorbed this fortitude as a precursor to her own healing journey. Elizabeth's plan moved like clockwork, the cogs of which were meticulously oiled with precision. With each new piece of evidence, with every acknowledgement of solidarity, no matter how seemingly insignificant, she laid them down like signposts on the road toward inevitable confrontation. Her path became clearer, not lined with retributive fervor, but with an indomitable desire for restoration, not just for her daughter, but for every silent voice trapped under the blanket of fear. Thus, it was not merely a confrontation Elizabeth sought, it was the liberation of truth, shackled too long in the shadows of deceit, now set to rise into the blinding clarity of exposure. She was prepared not only to unveil the truth but to navigate the aftermath, ensuring that as the battle smoke cleared, a reborn Sarah would stand beside her, no longer a victim, but a resilient co-author in the new chapter of their collective narrative. The streets leading to Robert's place of business were steeped in an ambient tension that matched Elizabeth's own determination. Each footfall resonated with a deliberate calm echoing off the silent walls of her consciousness as she approached the confrontation she had orchestrated. This was not just a meeting, it was a reckoning, an uncompromising presentation of the truth she had painstakingly collated. As Elizabeth entered the lobby, she drew a breath, preparing for the encounter that would lay bare the hidden facets of deceit that had ensnared her daughter. Her heart was a tempest, yet her demeanor remained an unfaltering facade, her eyes set with the clarity of unwavering resolve. The receptionist glanced up, perhaps sensing the unusual gravity of Elizabeth's demeanor, but before words could exchange, Elizabeth was passing undeterred in her quest. Inside his office, Robert's eyes widened with a false bravado, concealing the unease lurking beneath as Elizabeth presented herself at his threshold. She held his gaze, not with the timid uncertainty of someone seeking validation, but with the steely gaze of a mother armed with truth. Her entrance alone was a pronouncement that the time for manipulation had expired and the era of accountability had dawned. Robert attempted to mask his wariness behind a veneer of cordiality, inviting Elizabeth to sit. She remained standing, a physical testament to her unwavering stance. The folder she carried was not merely documents, but the culmination of months of betrayal, meticulously gathered and collated into an unassailable declaration of intent. As she laid out the evidence before him, her words punctuated the air with the precision of a finely honed blade. "You've hidden behind lies," she began, her voice calm yet thunderous in its quiet assertiveness, "but today we lay bare the truth." The weight of her statement seemed to hang momentarily suspended in the charged silence of the room. There was an almost imperceptible shift in Robert's posture, an acknowledgement of the fortress of deceit crumbling under the undeniable weight of evidence. Elizabeth described each piece of evidence with clinical precision, their power amplified not by emotional tirades, but by their sheer authenticity and the righteousness of the narrative they wove. The confrontation was as much about psychology as it was about evidence. Each point she made was not just an accusation, but a mirror held up to Robert's distorted reflection, forcing him to confront the grotesque realities he had hidden away. There was no anger in her voice, only an unyielding truth, one that could not be obscured by his practiced denials or strategic evasions. In countering Robert's faltering defenses, Elizabeth presented not only facts but framed each one within the larger tapestry of lies and betrayal that had entrapped her daughter. Her approach was deliberate, her genius apparent in the subtlety with which she revealed each layer like a careful hand, unraveling a tapestry of deceit. As she spoke, it became evident that this was not a mere exhibition of evidence, but a strategic dismantling of the fortress Robert had constructed around his manipulative machinations. Robert's attempts to negotiate or mitigate the impact of her truths fell flat, foundering on the shores of his own culpability. As Elizabeth countered each of his half-hearted justifications with the irrefutable clarity of documented proof, it became clear that the confrontation was no longer about defense or deflection. It was an obliteration of the shadowed ambiguity he had used as a shield. The power in Elizabeth's speech was not derived from the volume or overt fury, but from the relentless steadiness of her resolve. As the shards of his deception lay scattered at her feet, Robert could only watch as Elizabeth stood resolute and unfaltering, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a parent fighting against the stain of corruption for her child. The confrontation reached its zenith with Elizabeth's final assertion, not a threat, but a promise that justice would no longer be denied its rightful claim. As she turned to leave, the ripples of her presence lingered, a silent marker of the irrevocable shift in power. Emerging from the building, Elizabeth breathed in the fresh air of liberation, each inhale reinforcing her convictions that justice was not a passive expectation, but an active pursuit. Her stride was no longer burdened by the shadows of her past fears, but imbued with the light of truth, a beacon for Sarah and every soul seeking their voice against the tyranny of silence. The city buzzed with the hum of life around her, oblivious to the monumental shift that had occurred. Yet, in Elizabeth's heart there was a profound tranquility, the peace of a warrior who had drawn the line between victimization and vigilance. The liberation was not just her own, but a gift to Sarah, a testament to the strength found at the intersection of justice and reclamation. As the world turned on, she knew that while the confrontation had drawn to a close, the path to resolution had just begun. In the small town where everyone knows everyone, the whispers began as soon as Elizabeth made her way through the courthouse doors. Small towns, for all their charm, have a way of magnifying personal affairs into public spectacles. The news of Elizabeth's confrontation with Robert had spread like wildfire, each retelling adding another layer of intrigue, each opinion a reflection of the speaker's hidden biases and fears. Elizabeth was no stranger to the undercurrents of communal judgment. She could feel the eyes following her each time she entered a grocery store, the weight of perceptions pressing down like a heavy fog. Her resolve, however, remained undeterred, her love for Sarah driving her forward with a force that even the most critical gossip could not diminish. In the days following her bold confrontation, Elizabeth found herself navigating a new battleground, one of public perception. The town's close-knit networks were a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they offered rich resources for support, as friends and neighbors rallied around her, expressing their shock and pledging their support. On the other, there were those who questioned her motives, whispered accusations of overstepping boundaries, losing grip on the so-called peaceful status quo. In such a setting where personal lives entwine closely with public scrutiny, Elizabeth learned the psychological dance of maintaining her dignity amidst dissent. The dilemma of facing a divided community is not unlike standing in the eye of a storm, knowing full well that taking a step in any direction may draw unwanted attention. Yet it is not the storm that injures, it is the stillness of doing nothing that breeds regret. As rumors swirled around Sarah's ordeal and Robert's culpability, Elizabeth's lessons from the trenches of social warfare unfolded. The first was recognizing the underlying fear that fueled these narratives. People generally resist change, and Elizabeth's stand was a challenge to the status quo. She understood that by challenging Robert, she wasn't just disrupting one man's deceit, but shaking the foundations of a community that preferred blissful ignorance over inconvenient truths. Elizabeth adapted to the scrutiny by aligning herself with allies and leaning on relationships built on trust and integrity. Miss Camilla stood firm by her side, a steadfast pillar that never swayed under the pressure of public opinion. Together they formed a collective front, using their influence to quietly counteract the shadows of doubt with truth's clearer light. Elizabeth also discovered that public opinions, while loud, were often uninformed. Using this to her advantage, she turned each interaction into an opportunity for subtle persuasion. She shared only carefully considered insights into Sarah's plight, enough to provoke thought but never more than was prudent. Through these exchanges, she slowly began to alter the gossip mill's output, transforming rumors into whispers of empathy. Amidst this challenging social environment, the most potent weapon in Elizabeth's arsenal was simple, unyielding transparency. She did not hide from the whispers. Instead, she faced them with an openness that disarmed even her staunchest critics. Her forthrightness birthed a narrative of accountability, forcing the town to reconsider the easy comfort of assumption over the harder truths of justice. The journey through these trials reinforced Elizabeth's understanding that true strength lies not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to face it head-on time and again. There was freedom found in her transparency, a release from the need to conform to the town's expectations. This warriorish truism radiated through Sarah, who, by observing her mother's resolve, learned to navigate her pain and wear her history not as a badge of defeat, but as a testament of resilience. Meanwhile, Robert wore a different mask. Stripped of his aura, he sulked through the shadows of his misdeeds. His world, once bolstered by deception, began to crumble under the weight of exposure. Robert's supporters dwindled as the gravity of Elizabeth's revelations set in, rebalancing the small-town dynamics against him. His facade was not merely shattered, it was rendered powerless. Through this complex tableau of interpersonal power and public perception, Elizabeth's unwavering heart beat with the rhythm of hard-won wisdom. She came to know that justice, like trust, is not freely given but arduously earned. In a community fraught with judgment, Elizabeth's integrity stood as her beacon, guiding her and Sarah on a course toward peace and liberation. Elizabeth could take solace in the small victories, the knowing nods, the subtle shifts in demeanor, the gradual softening of once critical voices. Each sign that truth leaned its direction offered reassurance that while the path was arduous, its endpoint was assured. The community ever so slowly began to reweave itself around this new narrative of strength and justice. Amidst the echoes of courtroom declarations and the sporadic flashes of media cameras, Elizabeth stood firm, a phoenix in the midst of her trial's conflagration. Her resolve sharpened by the embers of injustice suffered by her daughter, Sarah pulsed with the urgency of 1,000 beating drums. The battle for truth playing out not just in legal documents but also within the social corridors of their small town demanded more than just tangible proof. It called for an unyielding spirit, one that Elizabeth cultivated with every glance of disbelief and every murmur of doubt cast against her. You can almost feel the weight of every gaze upon her, scrutinizing and silently debating the veracity of her claims. These whispers, though, became the very fuel that propelled Elizabeth forward. Equipped with support from her lawyer, an astute counsel who grasped the intricacies of both the law and the psychological warfare being waged, Elizabeth meticulously crafted a case that would stand impervious to the distortions Robert tempted to wield as his shield. The town itself stood as both adversary and ally. Certain factions, weighed down by Robert's previous personas of charisma, remained unflinchingly skeptical, unwilling to dismantle the idol they once revered. Yet Elizabeth understood that winning in the court of public opinion was a marathon, not a sprint. For each dismissive glance or veiled accusation there was a counterbalance, the steady, perceptive eyes of those who began to see the cracks in the story Robert proffered. As the legal machinations whirred into motion, Elizabeth faced another battle, a psychological one. The fatigue of litigation loomed large, threatening to snuff out the embers of justice that Elizabeth so fiercely protected. But it was in this fatigue that Elizabeth found a surprising ally: clarity that transformed her fatigue into strategy, insight into action. She consulted with her lawyer about every conceivable outcome, every legal stratagem, creating in the process a fortress of evidence whose seams were tightly sewn by her willpower. The tactile reality of her war room, a dining table strewn with authenticated documents, photos, and missives exchanged between Sarah and those who stood with her, served as a testament to Elizabeth's unwavering resolve. Here was a narrative that, when pieced together, reflected not mere victimization but resilience. Elizabeth knew that the narrative of victimhood, though compelling, was not sufficient on its own. She had to orchestrate a symphony of evidence that resounded with incontrovertible truth. As the case advanced, Elizabeth became acutely aware of the narrative arcs playing in the background. Every courtroom drama has its crescendos and decrescendos, its protagonists and antagonists. Elizabeth knew she had to turn her opponent's momentum against them. By compelling Denise Roberts' paramour to testify, the dynamics shifted. Denise's appearance in court, a figure once embroiled in clandestine meetings, was an unexpected twist, one that challenged the secrecy Robert desperately clung to. Denise's testimony became a pivotal moment, not just for its direct implication in the background of deceit, but because it catalyzed a shift within the collective psyche of the town. There, before Elizabeth's eyes, unfolded the powerful transformation of a story about betrayal into a universal narrative of forced integrity, triumphing over orchestrated mistruths. Each admission from Denise peeled away a layer of Robert's carefully constructed facade, leaving exposed the bare skeleton of his misdeeds. Through the crucible of public opinion and legal scrutiny, Elizabeth persisted, fortified by the sight of her daughter's gradual healing. Sarah, too, began to reconstruct her narrative, a journey buttressed by each positive affirmation from supportive community members and the profound silence of those who once doubted. Elizabeth's resolve bore fruit as the tide turned, not suddenly, but through the steady erosion of the barriers truth inevitably dismantles. Victory in the courtroom, Elizabeth knew, would carry wider implications. It would set a precedent, a clarion call for those shackled by secrets to take up their own cause for truth. The community Elizabeth hoped would continue to redefine itself in light of what transpired. It was about more than just legal justice. It was about societal reintegration and the delicate sewing up of social fabric torn asunder by deceit. In the ongoing battle, Elizabeth's story became emblematic, a narrative not only of personal strife, but of universal justice. She understood that in arming herself with truth, she wasn't just fighting for Sarah, but for every person in their tight-knit community yearning for liberation from chains of silence. So as the anticipation of the court's verdict hovered, Elizabeth stood ready, her spirit undimmed, her resolve immutable, prepared not just to fight for justice, but to redefine it. Whispered conversations carry a weight of their own in a courtroom fraught with anticipation and the scent of truth waiting to unfurl among the silent demands for justice. Elizabeth and Sarah stand on the precipice of decisive change, girded by the evidence painstakingly woven under Elizabeth's vigilant eye. Yet, as the stakes soar higher with each tick of the clock, a shadowy complication loomed, threatening to tip the scales. Denise Roberts' mistress held a veritable arsenal of unspoken truths within her silence. For Elizabeth, the question wasn't whether to bring Denise into the light, but how to wield the leverage she surreptitiously gathered, shifting the dynamics from quiet resistance to tangible retribution. Each story carries secrets, cracks hidden beneath surface, ripples waiting for the right seismic shift. Denise embodied this crevasse. Elizabeth knew the web in which Denise was enmeshed. She was as much a pawn in Robert's game as unwilling accomplice. The art lay in coaxing her into unspooling threads of complicity into something transformative, a truth that could reframe the narrative and soften the rigid edges of allegiance. Elizabeth approached Denise not with malice, but with an understanding forged by the mirrored reflections of betrayal, carried by all women hurt by Robert's deceit. Finding Denise anxious and guilt-ridden, Elizabeth pierced the veils of silence that bound her. She presented a tapestry of events, each thread vibrant with evidence. Denise could no longer ignore texts, voicemails, silent transactions veiled as harmless exchanges, but potent with underlying implications. To sway Denise, Elizabeth offered more than just the cold confines of legal obligations. She presented a path to redemption, where testifying brought moral clarity and release from the oppressiveness of secrets. It was this moral ledger that Elizabeth leveraged, understanding deeply that in absolving one's tacit complicity lay immense power. In Denise, she cultivated not just an informant but a woman awakened to her own capacity for influencing justice. An impasse lingered as Denise wrestled with her conscience, her loyalty to Robert intertwined with her need for self-preservation. Yet Elizabeth's resounding clarity made the potential cost of silence abundantly clear, and the whispered burden of truth bore down with increasing urgency. In Denise's eventual agreement to testify, an unspoken alliance solidified. It wasn't just about testifying against Robert, but about reconfiguring roles in a story where the oppressed rise from their designated corners, intent on taking part in the redirection of their shared script. Denise's resolve marked an unforeseen turn in the case and became a linchpin for the prosecution. Her testimony was not just factual reporting, but a narrative told with raw sincerity, charting a tale of manipulation that painted Robert with an unflinching brush. It was a union of voices against Robert's profuse denials, voices once silenced, now resounding through the courtroom, echoing with clear resonance the years of suffering endured under his shadows. As she spoke, she became more than an accessory to truth. She was a beacon illuminating Robert's transactional relationships fueled by dominance and deceit. The courtroom shifted, albeit subtly, like axes realigning under duress, heralding a new understanding of entrenched perspectives. As Denise recounted her experiences, chronicles of intimidation and coercion laid bare. A palpable shift tugged at the heartstrings of an audience, slowly leaning towards comprehension and empathy. The empathy Elizabeth hoped for shone brilliantly, reshaping the judiciary's lenses now trained to scrutinize Robert's every gesture and word with well-earned skepticism. In the wake of her testimony, the courtroom wasn't just a vessel for cold adjudication but a crucible for redefining human connections. Denise stepped away from the stand, not diminished but revitalized her truth, spoken and echoing louder, her fears of recrimination overshadowed by the deserving applause of courage and newfound legitimacy. For Elizabeth and Sarah, Denise's cooperation served not just their narrative but sculpted a broader communal reckoning with transparency and accountability. Amidst this transformation, Elizabeth kept her gaze firmly ahead, her purpose unyielded. The journey was unfinished, albeit reimagined, as Denise's inclusion paved pathways unanticipated yet welcome. Justice demanded its due, and Elizabeth continued to marshal the fortitude needed to summon it forth, not just for Sarah but for every potential sister to follow in dignity's name. Victory would be a complex dance of individuals asserting their truths, bolstered by alliances constructed outside parameters of convenience. As the echoes of Denise's testimony faded, the courtroom remained charged with potential, carrying the promise of justice slowly unfurling its wings. The courtroom crackles with tension as Elizabeth, Sarah, and their lawyer commandeer the space with calculated poise. This room, a battleground of truth and deception, is busy dissecting the intricacies of personal betrayal transmuted into judicial proceedings. Elizabeth, embodying a pillar of resolve, watches as her carefully woven tapestry of evidence challenges the facade Robert thought impenetrable. His aura, once replete with manipulation and false confidence, now shimmers with an unease he cannot mask. The judge, scrutinizing the intricacies of Sarah's plight, holds the room captive in silence, the profound weight of justice heavy in the air. As evidence painstakingly unfolds, like pages turning in an old damning book, it chips away at Robert's veneer of innocence. Sarah's voice, though still frail, from the scars of collapsed trust, resonates with the crystallized authenticity of a personal liberation narrative. Her testimony, coupled with poignant visual and textual artifacts, shifts the narrative towards irrevocable truth. Each statement flutters like a butterfly with wings of steel, increasing the discomfort for those who'd cast unjust doubts. Elizabeth's lawyer, a maestro in her own right, masterfully weaves Denise's unexpected yet significant cooperation into the prosecution's storyline. This critical bond, forged in the fires of persuasion and truth, enlarges the fragile frame of Robert's defense into brittle pieces. Denise's account, stripped of ambiguity and fortified by her newfound revelations, captures the courtroom's attention entirely. Her testimony no longer serves just Elizabeth and Sarah, but paints a broader tapestry of retribution, forcing everyone's lens to focus sharply on the repercussions of Robert's misdeeds. As the defense attempts to claw back some semblance of control, their stumbling narrative bleeds into desperation. Their strategy, once deftly manipulative, lacks the armor it previously boasted. Robert's demeanor shifts with palpable discomfort as his miscalculations compound each moment, etching scales of defeat deeper across his expression. His defense attorney's attempts to counter are met with cutting precision from Elizabeth's legal team, countering with undeniable proof that stands resolute against the feeble parries of strategy steeped in deception. The audience, a tapestry of community figures and strangers interwoven by curiosity and moral investment, remains on edge, each testimony unraveling biases and preconceptions. The community, once precariously balanced on the edge of skepticism, now sees the fractures in Robert's narrative as illuminating windows into darker truths. The evolution of public perception teeters on a knife's edge, swaying steadily towards an embrace of undeniable reason. Outside the courtroom, whispers of burgeoning justice merge with echoes of scandal unraveling. The community, having once thrived on rumors, slowly shifts towards authenticity, narratives now deeply rooted in the firm ground of truth rather than the shifting sands of supposition. Elizabeth, her visage marked not by vengeance but by quiet dignity, knows this battle stretches beyond familial borders, serving a broader purpose of redress and morphing societal norms. The courtroom scene becomes a stage for collective consciousness, challenging communities to reevaluate the structures on which they stand. Inside, Robert sits in his now hollow prominence, eyes facing forward, but mind ensnared by the recall of irreversible truths. His crafted mirage of domestic success, honed through indiscriminate deceit, dissolves under the relentless gaze of authenticity. Elizabeth, standing as advocate mother and moral compass, watches with a steely resolve as the proceedings crystallize into an undeniable force of change. The anxiety that once threatened to unravel her resolve now surrenders to a burgeoning hope woven from twine spun by justice's moral loom. The close of proceedings draws near with the weight of every word, every pointed argument, and every delineated piece of evidence building towards the climax of judgment. Exhaling the breath of alliances, mistakes, and weathered truths, the courtroom bathes in an unparalleled silence. It envelops the gallery, distilling the essence of a communal understanding, nurtured by months of relentless pursuit. As the judge's gavel looms in the intimate clasp of impending justice, Elizabeth's vision unwaveringly fixes on a horizon, reborn from the ashes of conflict. Transformations forged here in this charged space promise a brighter restitution for not just Sarah but every voice stifled by similar desecrations. This moment, engraved into the annals of collective memory, commands Elizabeth and Sarah to face a future unburdened by shadows of lies. A future where battles fought in courage marry with the enduring spirit of justice, bequeathing an unyielding legacy. The verdict in favor of Elizabeth and Sarah is a pivotal moment, a resounding acknowledgement of truth echoing in the halls of justice. Yet as the gavel descends with a finality that reverberates through the courtroom, Elizabeth feels a complexity of emotions wash over her. It is not simple relief. It is a mosaic of triumph and sorrow, empowerment and grief. The scars left behind by Robert's betrayal are not easily mended. They underscore the profound emotional depth Sarah had to navigate, depths that Elizabeth also traversed, bearing the dual weight of motherhood and justice. The courtroom, once tense with apprehension, now relaxes slightly as supporters exchange glances of solidarity and relief. It is an unspoken pact among them, an understanding of the sacrifices made and battles fought. Elizabeth senses a shift, a palpable transformation in the air. It marks the transition from survival to healing, from a defensive stance to one ready to reclaim the future. Yet she remains acutely aware of the work ahead, the long, arduous journey of piecing together the fragments of broken lives. In the community, whispers that once carried skepticism and accusation begin to change their tune. There is a reevaluation, perhaps even a reckoning about the narratives people choose to believe. The verdict becomes more than a personal victory. It reflects a shift in collective consciousness, a societal statement against the normalization of abuse and deceit. Elizabeth and Sarah's story becomes one of empowerment, an indelible reminder that justice, though sometimes elusive, can be claimed with perseverance and courage. But what of the emotional scars? The community may rally, opinions may change, but the inner battle is less visible, confined to the silent spaces within the heart. Sarah, though vindicated, carries the echoes of betrayal within her, a reminder of deception once masked in love. Elizabeth too bears this weight, a cocktail of anger and sadness blended with a newfound hope. They must confront these emotions head-on, allowing themselves the grace and patience needed to heal. This journey isn't just about overcoming the past, it's about redefining the present and cultivating a future untainted by shadows. Elizabeth watches as Sarah bravely takes steps towards healing, finding strength in places she never thought to look before. Elizabeth stands as guide and witness her presence, a constant source of support. Together they embark on a path of rediscovery, exploring joys that were once dimmed by fear and pain. The broader implications of the case seep into the community's fabric, prompting difficult conversations about accountability and empathy. Elizabeth sees the ripple effect of their legal victory, how it encourages quiet nods of solidarity from other women, some emboldened to share their own stories. There's an emerging narrative of empowerment, as if each testimony of survival adds another brushstroke to a collective mural of resilience. A serendipitous outcome of the trial is the newfound camaraderie it fosters. The support system Elizabeth and Sarah built, friends, neighbors, allies, becomes an enduring bond, a testament to community strength in adversity. They are not just supporters but active participants in the ongoing fight for justice and truth. There's a shared recognition that their battle transcends individual experience, offering a beacon of hope for others ensnared in similar struggles. As Elizabeth and Sarah reflect on their battle, both legal and emotional, they recognize the intricate tapestries of their journey, woven with threads of resilience, love, and unyielding justice. This reflection is crucial, serving as both a grounding force and a catalyst for continued advocacy. Elizabeth becomes more than a mother and protector. She emerges as a leader, using her voice to amplify the stories of those still silenced by fear. Their narrative does not end with the verdict. It evolves with every step they take towards healing. It is a story of ongoing renewal, a testament to the transformative power of truth and the healing balm of justice. Elizabeth embraces the future with cautious optimism, knowing that while the path to recovery is long, it is illuminated by the lessons learned and the strength forged in adversity. This transformed reality offers a profound lesson that through pain and injustice there arises an unparalleled strength, a fierce determination to not only survive but to thrive. It's an open-ended story with its most powerful chapters yet unwritten, inspiring not just Sarah and Elizabeth but an entire community to believe in the possibility of change, in the promise of healing, and in the enduring power of love and justice. With the trial behind them and the truth finally acknowledged in the eyes of the law, Sarah and Elizabeth stand at the threshold of a new chapter, the struggle having cemented an unbreakable bond between them. The verdict marks not just a legal victory but the beginning of an emotional rebuilding process for Sarah, echoing across the community as a story of hope, resilience, and renewal. Sarah, who once felt the crushing weight of betrayal and isolation, is now surrounded by affirmations of support and love, her spirit gradually reclaimed in the warmth of her mother's unwavering presence. The journey of recovery begins with tender, often solitary moments, where Elizabeth encourages Sarah to explore forgotten joys, from painting evocative canvases to journaling her thoughts in vivid, cathartic prose. It's a personal renaissance, a blossoming creativity that had been stifled under the oppressive shackles of her past relationship. The arts become Sarah's sanctuary, offering her an expressive outlet to channel her emotions, speaking volumes where words often fail. Elizabeth watches her daughter with a protective yet joyful gaze. These small victories of self-rediscovery signify more than just moments of happiness. They represent steps away from pain, toward a future untainted by fear. As a mother, Elizabeth's role evolves from protector to an enabler of Sarah's growth, providing tranquility that nurtures the embers of life within her daughter into a full flame of agency and confidence. The process is neither linear nor easy. There are shadows of doubt and echoes of hurt that occasionally obscure their path forward, but with each setback arises an opportunity to reaffirm strength. They approach these moments together, Elizabeth's counsel molding resilience through conversations that unravel fears and allow Sarah to confront the specters of her past without the numbing chill of denial. It's a journey through complexities that only the intimacy of shared bonds can navigate, filled with the shared laughter of a past cherished and hopeful plans for the future they are now free to imagine. In rebuilding her life, Sarah finds solace in communal ties once severed by her abuser's isolating tactics. The trials of Elizabeth and Sarah serve as a beacon within the community, rallying collective support from those who watched and stood by through their public battle. Like a stone thrown into a still pond, the ripples of their narrative reach far beyond their immediate sphere, an invitation for others to connect, contribute, and care. In this healing phase, Elizabeth and Sarah's experiences speak volumes to those who find themselves trapped in similar situations, their journey a testament to the transformative power of justice and advocacy. The community, once a silent observer, becomes an active participant in their healing, embracing them with opportunities to engage and contribute. As Sarah attends local gatherings, workshops, and support group meetings, she gains confidence, encouraged by stories of survival and recovery shared by women who once walked similar paths. For Elizabeth, the role of advocate continues beyond her personal victory, igniting a broader mission to support others. She channels the learnings of their trial and recovery process into action, advocating for policy changes and supporting local initiatives aimed at helping other women find their voice and their strength. By leveraging her newfound influence, Elizabeth becomes a catalyst for awareness, bringing stories of resilience and struggle to the forefront of community consciousness. Their lives, once confined by the boundaries of manipulation and abuse, now unfold with open possibilities, guided by lessons carved out of adversity. As they walk together through this new reality, the pursuit of joy supplants the scars left behind, a testament to the indomitable spirit that defines them. This process isn't merely about bouncing back, it is about reshaping and redefining a life free from the shadow of past trauma. In that transformation lies the true essence of their journey, reflecting a nuanced understanding of healing that transcends legal victories and embraces personal growth, emotional freedom, and an unyielding thirst for justice and compassion. As Elizabeth and Sarah navigate this landscape of recovery, their eyes are set firmly on the horizon, where each sunrise brings fresh hope and each sunset promises peace. They move forward not as victims defined by their past, but as warriors of a story that continues to inspire, illuminate, and alter the very fabric of their surroundings. And in this ongoing narrative woven with love, fortitude, and redemption, the lessons they impart reverberate through time, leaving a legacy of courage and an invitation to reclaim one's life, no matter how daunting the path may seem. The journey of healing they discover is as pivotal as the triumph itself, crafting a tapestry of life unrestrained by the shackles of fear. In the quiet aftermath of resolve and retribution, where whispers of justice have settled into echoes, Elizabeth stands as the guardian of silence, a silence that speaks volumes more than words ever could. The world around her, once saturated with chaos, and the din of confrontation, gradually succumbs to quietude, where truth shadows every corner like a silent sentinel. Her quest was not driven by vengeance, but by a profound yearning to restore dignity to a life battered by betrayal, to reclaim a stolen narrative. As the dust of conflict begins to settle, the players in this tale face the slow retreat into irrelevance. She watches Robert's decline from afar, like a tower crumbling in slow motion, each stone a remnant of deceit now tumbling into the abyss he carved for himself. With the spotlight of public scrutiny having turned away, his life resembles a hollow frame where only echoes of his own machinations fill the void. Alone, with nothing but shadows for company, he wanders through an existence of his own making, each step a reminder of unsaid apologies and unfulfilled promises. Robert has become a shadowed figure in the narrative of his own downfall, a cautionary tale etched in isolation. In contrast, Elizabeth's journey takes a quieter and more profound trajectory. Her victory was not just in the courtrooms of justice, but in the silent chambers of her heart, where she discovered resilience and power dormant beneath her scars. She walks through the world differently now, with a quiet assurance that no longer seeks validation in noise but finds strength in stillness. The lessons learned from the ashes of adversity have crafted her into an embodiment of grace under pressure, a woman who has traded cries for justice for the serenity of peace earned. And you, standing at the crossroads of reflection, how far would perseverance carry you? Would you muster the fortitude to await the inevitable unraveling of lies, to let patience wear the crown in the theater of truth? In the labyrinth of betrayal, would wisdom find you as it did her, or would you succumb to the clamor of revenge? A mirror is held up to your soul, urging contemplation of your breaking points, your capacities for silence in the face of tumult. The finale is not a conclusion, but a gentle continuation where wisdom and history weave an ongoing tapestry. There lies a profound absence of noise, an absence filled not with regrets, but with the sacred pulse of time's forward march. Some seek their endings in grand gestures and blaring horns of triumph. But here the victory comes as a twilight transition, where closure is found in the gentle slumber of old battles and the dawning promise of fresh starts. A quiet longing pervades one that does not seek to forgive for the sake of forgiveness, but understands that liberty is woven into the fabric of letting go. Elizabeth's story remains unwritten in stone, a living testament untethered by past chains, illuminated by lessons, and inspired to continue. And when the narrative's tide recedes, what remains is the profound capacity of human resilience, a symbol as eternal as the ring, lying quietly on the floor, untouched yet powerful in its message of what was and what will never be. Again, The door once barricaded by fear and uncertainty stands unlocked. Freedom awaits those willing to step through beyond blame and into the light of uncharted tomorrows. Breathing in the assurance of silence, Elizabeth finds her redemption not in the utterances of victories proclaimed, but in the quiet sanctity of a narrative, renewed a conclusion that whispers rather than screams, binding the wounds embracing. Infinite possibilities yet to unfold. In the tranquility of the empty room where her story once resonated, Elizabeth stands at peace with the quiet echo of transformation, a reminder that not all endings need voices. Some indeed are sacred carryovers into the fading light.